Hey there Wargamers, Justin the Art Painter here from Death Ray Designs, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to apply decals to flat surfaces as well as curved surfaces. Now the particular pieces we're working on today have been pre-painted, and if you're interested in how we achieve the effects that we got with that, make sure you check out our previous video where we explained how to do pre-shading with an airbrush and lay down our first layer of colors. For the miniatures I've got to work on here today, we've got a Rhino hatch and a Space Marine shoulder pad. Now this particular hatch is a flat surface, and it doesn't have to be a Rhino hatch if you're trying to replicate this effect. It could be anything on any one of your miniatures, any vehicle, anything that's got a flat surface. Over here on the right, we've got a Space Marine shoulder pad, and I've chosen this today because this is a curved surface, and I want to show you guys the difference between applying a decal on a flat surface and a curved surface and how to get that painted on look, get rid of the wrinkles, and make the decals look seamless on the miniatures. To get these miniatures in their current state, we have a video that shows pre-shading and how to lay down colors. If you want to know how we did that, please check out our videos over on YouTube. And that'll get you caught up on where we are to get to the blue colors today. But if you aren't interested in the blue color and you just want to know how to do the decals, this is all you'll need to have. To get things started, you're going to want to have a pair of tweezers when applying decals. And I also like to have an X-Acto blade handy. It is pretty much a necessity for applying decals, but it's also really good to have handy for just about anything in the hobby world. Having that tool in your tool chest and readily available is great. You're also going to want a canister or a cup of clean water. It's important that this is clean. And you're also going to want these two chemicals here, Microset and Microsol. There are a variety of products out there that can do similar effects, but these are the two that I like, and you'll see how they work in action today. The last two products that you're going to need to apply decals properly is a bottle of gloss varnish. I like to use Liquitex. There's a variety of different gloss varnishes you can use, but this is what I'm going to use today. It's important to note you can hand paint things like this on, but I'm going to be applying this through an airbrush. Be aware that if you're using a different style of gloss varnish, you may need to wait to allow it to cure quickly. I like to use the Liquitex gloss because it cures quickly, I don't get any hazing, and I can get going fast. I also like to use the Liquitex brand matte varnish. It's the last step that I use in applying decals. It's very effective, goes through an airbrush very nicely, and you don't have to worry about humidity, temperature, or anything like that going on outside. Additionally, if you aren't aware already, you can get both of these products at Hobby Lobby discounted with their app. If you aren't using that, that is a quick hobby tip that you should put into your hobby arsenal. Finally, the last thing you'll need is some decals. If you want to set some decals, you might as well have some decals. Today I'm going to show you guys how to set some Ultramarines decals on this hatch and the Space Marine shoulder pad. For today's tutorial, we're going to go ahead and identify the decals we want to use. In this case, I think we're just going to use one of these basic U emblems for our shoulder pad, and we'll probably do the same for our Rhino hatch as well. So now when you come in here, make sure you cut out your decal very carefully. Don't cut your fingers. Don't spill blood for the blood god if it involves your fingers. Just spill the blood of your little miniature enemies. It's important to be careful when you're doing this, as you don't want to cut the sides of the decal. You want to make sure you get as close as possible. On some of these decals you can see the clear film on the edges, and if there's an excess abundance of that, you'll want to cut the decal very closely to get that off. So now that we have that decal removed here, there's one more step to go. Now that we've got our small decal cut for our shoulder pad, we're going to go ahead and cut out one of these larger U's for our Rhino hatch as well. It looks like I accidentally have a little bit of paint or something that got on the decal sheet here before, so we're going to cut out one of the U's that's not already tainted. As we did with the shoulder pad, make sure you cut really close. Be careful not to cut your fingers and not to slice across the actual decal itself. You want to get as close as possible, get a nice clean cut, and have a nice clean decal to apply later. Now you might be thinking, we've got our decals cut now. Can we jump right into applying the decals to the surfaces? No. We actually have a pretty basic step here that some people might actually not know about or consider doing. And for that, we're going to prep the surface with a gloss varnish first. This is really important because it creates a slick surface for the decals to adhere to and smooth over. It may seem counterintuitive or weird, but trust me, it works very nicely. The benefits of gloss varnishing a miniature first are much more obvious for something like this, a rounded shoulder pad, where a decal wants to conform in a different way. Essentially, we're taking something flat and trying to bend it over something rounded. So with the process we're doing today, we're going to help blend that decal into these curved surfaces, and it's also a good practice to use on the flat ones as well. So let's go ahead and prep these surfaces with our gloss varnish. So we're going to start with the hatch here first, and we always spray on the back of our glove. As you can see, I've got a little bit of a red tint here on my glove first, and I actually had some residue left over from a previous tutorial I was filming, and had we not sprayed on the back of our glove, that would have been sprayed right on to our miniature and would have ruined it. So always spray here first before you go on to the miniature. It will save you some headache later. You don't want to get angry. Just like we do with normal painting, when we start to spray here on our miniature with varnishes, just do smooth passes. Don't focus on any one area too heavily. Now, with varnishes, I've found that if you focus on one area too heavily, you start to get that pooling or spidering effect that you can get with paint. It can be much more detrimental to the model when it dries. It's going to look real weird and awkward, and it's better to exercise some patience here and really practice going slow and applying a smooth, thin coat. I also find with varnishes, sometimes less is more. This takes a lot less than you think. You just want to make sure you get a good thin coverage across the whole model, so it's got a consistent look and a consistent feel. With our Rhino hatch now drying, we're going to apply some of this gloss varnish to our shoulder pad as well. Now, one unintentional but also good benefit of applying a gloss varnish to your miniatures like this is this dries very hard, and it is shiny, but it's very hard, so you're going to get this nice protective coat on the miniatures so that by the time they're done and we've applied the matte varnish over the top, you've got 2 coats of protection that help prevent chipping and make the models a little bit stronger so that your paint's protected. Now that our gloss varnish on the surface of these miniatures is dry, we can begin on the process of applying decals. In this particular case, we're going to be starting with our shoulder pad first. Because it is a curved surface, the process for applying the decal takes a few extra layers of the chemicals to make the decal really conform. And I'm going to start with that first so it's got more time to dry and apply multiple layers while we're working on the hatch itself. Pro level tip here, before you apply a decal, I like to apply a couple of micro slits around the surface of the decal here. Now these cuts will be onto the surface of the actual image, and the slits that you might make will differ from decal to decal. But in this one I'm going to go around the edges here. We're using my tweezers to hold it down. We're going to do some really small cuts. So we're going to be focusing on the underside of the kind of the top of the U here, and then we're going to go around the edges. We're going to put a cut here in between the top of the U right here. And essentially what these little cuts are going to do is allow this decal to kind of fold over itself a little bit. So imagine trying to take a piece of paper and wrap it around a baseball or tennis ball or basketball, and it really starts to wrinkle. But if you start to put little cuts in strategic areas around the piece of paper, or in this case the decal, it can conform over itself a little bit and blend a little bit better. In the case of what we're doing today, we're going to be using some solvents that smell kind of like vinegar, and they're going to help really soften up the decal. So not only will it be folding over on itself, it's going to be real malleable as well, and we're going to increase the odds that we get a real smooth transition and a painted on look. So this extra little step along with the gloss varnish is the pro level thing to do if you really want to get good looking decals. Word of caution here though, be careful, don't do too many and don't go too deep with this. You want these to be really small along the edges. You don't want to just chop up and Freddy Krueger your your decal here, folks. So with a little bit of practice, I'm confident you can get this. Once we've got all the cuts in our decal, the next thing we're going to want to grab is our container of water, as well as our bottle of Micro Set. Now I like to remember the name of this by saying Micro Set as to set a decal, and Micro Sol as the solvent that goes over the top as the second step. For this one, we're going to be using Micro Set first. So we're going to grab our decal here, put it into our tweezers, and then we're going to soak it into the water until it is ready to slide off. Now this part takes a little bit of patience. If you happen to check the decal from time to time with a paintbrush, when you pull it out and kind of rub the paintbrush across it to see if it's ready to slide, when you're doing this, just be careful. You don't want to be impatient and then do this and then tear the decal and have to start completely over. It's also worth noting that I use a really crappy paintbrush for this step because I don't see the need to tear up one of my good paintbrushes applying a decal. A crappy synthetic one will work just fine. Alright, so give our decal another test here. Looks like it's ready to slide. Yep, it's ready to lay this down on our miniature. First thing I do is I get the excess water out of my paintbrush, and then I'm going to come in with an ample amount of Micro Set. Remember, Micro Set is what we're going to use to set the decal. I can't say set enough here. So we're going to apply a good portion of this to the surface here, get it nice and wet. And the idea here is we want the decal to lay on top of this and allow this to kind of help it blend. I want to come in here and very carefully slide the decal onto the surface. Now it's important to go slow with this and be patient and use the paintbrush to slide it around until you get it where you want it to be. Now if you're too heavy-handed with this or you push too hard in some areas, because there are slits in the decal, it may tear. So be very, very careful. As you can see here, I'm getting a little bit more Micro Set to wet my paintbrush here so that I can move the decal with a little bit of lubrication, so to speak, and also because this particular fluid is going to help it blend anyway. So we're just sitting here kind of getting it set, sliding some of the wrinkles out, and once I'm satisfied with where it is, we'll let it set and dry. Now it's important when you're satisfied with the decal being where it is that you let it dry completely before you move on to the next step. In this case we'll have ample time because we're working on a second piece here. However, if you move on to the next step before that decal is dry, you risk rehydrating it and pulling it up and tearing it, and it's just better to be really patient when applying decals. While our shoulder pad is drying, we're going to go ahead and prepare the decal and the surface of our Rhino hatch here. when you're working on a cutting surface, make sure you're careful not to lay a decal on a wet spot like I almost did here. But just like we did with the Space Marine shoulder pad, we're going to put some micro cuts into our decal. Now, this particular process is not 100% necessary because we're working with a flat surface. It's just something that I like to get into the habit of doing. So we're going to go ahead and get that done, and then we'll get ready to lay this decal. With our micro slits done, it's time to come in with our tweezers here, grab our decal, and we're going to be soaking it in our water here. Now again, just be patient when you're doing this. Don't go too fast. Don't come in and disturb the decal too quickly. You don't want to tear it up. Also, pay particular attention when you are dipping this into the water, and don't wait too long. Many times I've been working with decals where I'm soaking the decal, watch a TV or jamming out to YouTube, and then I look up 2 minutes later and the decal is in the bottom of the reservoir because it slid right off. So just go slow, but also pay some attention. With our decal softened up and ready to slide off, the next step is to apply some micro set to the surface of this as well. I'm going to get it nice and wet here, ready for the decal. And now let's go ahead and slide the decal on top. Try and line this up as best you can, and then come back in with your paintbrush and slide it around. Dip it into the solution if necessary. Sometimes these start to dry out or adhere, and you have to add a little bit more solution to kind of get them to come back up so you can continue to slide them and move them around. One thing to be aware of is that you did put micro slits or cuts into this decal, and when you're trying to slide it around, it's real easy to go over the top and be a little bit heavy-handed and slice the decal right in half with the paintbrush. So just be patient, be gentle, and if you're getting a little bit too much resistance while it's still wet, just to get a little bit more solution from your micro set onto your brush, wet the area, and slide the decal until you're happy. Now, if you find you've put a little bit too much solution on here, just use your paintbrush when it's cleaned out and has no solution in it to kind of sop it up. Use that capillary action just like you would when applying a wash to pull some of that fluid off the surface. With the decal where I want it here, I'm quite happy, but I'm going to come in and I'm going to do a little cleanup work. We're going to sop up some of that extra solution that's on here one more time just to make sure we don't have just too much laying around. Being particularly careful not to touch the actual decal. I don't want to slide it here. If it started to dry or adhere at all, I don't want to tear it. You know, just be very careful and gentle and be patient with this step. So now that's all that's left, is to let that one dry, but in the meantime, we're going to move over to our next solution and work on our shoulder pad. With our decals dry, it's time to move on to the next step. For that, we're going to be using our micro sol. I'm going to be applying a coat of this across both of the surfaces here, but we're going to start with the shoulder pad first because it's been drying longer and it's going to need multiple coats. So when you're looking at this here, you can still see some wrinkles here right around the edges, which is why we put the micro cuts in here initially to help with that. But this solution is going to help us get rid of this as well. It's going to really help blend this decal into the surface and smooth it out. So when applying this, we're going to put it very gently over the top. I like to coat the whole area here. You don't want to press too hard on the decal, just get a little bit soft over the top. This can reactivate or rehydrate the decal, which means it can slide. So you want to work quickly. Don't apply too much pressure to the decal, and don't jab at it with a paintbrush. Just apply a coat to this, and when you get a nice amount of the micro sol over the whole area, it's time to let it dry. In this case, we're going to let it dry and come back for another coat later. With that shoulder pad now drying, we're going to come in here and we're going to apply a layer of micro sol to our rhino hatch here as well. Now this one's already blended in pretty well, but we're still going to do this for good measure because it's just a good practice to get into, and it's going to give you a really good finish. Now there's the techniques are going to be relatively the same here. Going to not press too hard on the decal, get a nice thin coat across the whole surface, and try not to apply too much pressure because we don't want to rehydrate it and start to slide it around. We just want to have this over the top and let the chemical do its work. With our first layer of micro sol now down and dry, you can really see how it's had an awesome impact on the shoulder pad. The wrinkles and stuff have started to blend in more, and with another coat, it should really start to make this slide in and transition nicely. There's a few wrinkles left on this one as well, and one more coat of the micro sol should finish it up nicely. Now this is just a repeat of the last step, but the same procedure applies. We're going to apply a thin coat of micro sol across the top of the surface here, being very gentle, covering the whole area, and not jabbing or pressing too hard down on the decals. Again, the decal could still rehydrate or reactivate and move around or be torn. So we got a nice coat on our shoulder pad, and we're going to come in and apply another thin coat of this onto our rhino hatch as well. And once this dries, we'll be back for the final step, and you're going to see some amazingly blended decals. Our final layer of microsol is now dry, and as you can see here, the Space Marine shoulder pad has no wrinkles. It's blended and transitioned in quite flawlessly. The only thing left for it is to hit it with a matte varnish and paint the shoulder border, and it's ready for a Space Marine. Our Rhino hatch here is in a similar state here. The wrinkles are now gone. All we really need to do is hit it with that matte varnish and some weathering, and if this was actually on a vehicle, it'd be ready to go. Transitioning over here, the only thing left to do is apply this matte varnish. It's important you spray on the back of your hand first, just to make sure that you're getting the right consistency and the right color paints coming out. Sometimes when you clean an airbrush, you think you've got it completely clean, and then you go to spray a model, and there's residue left over from the cleaning solution or the previous paint, and then it sprays out over your miniature, and it's ruined. In this case, we'd rather be applying thin coats for matte varnish and not some weird cleaning resolution or cleaning solution or thin down dried up paint or something on there. So, as with previous airbrushing techniques though, we're going to come in here with thin coats of this. We don't want it to pool up too much. We want to make sure we hit all the areas that look like they're shining with a coat of this matte. We're going to come over here and do the same thing on the shoulder pad. Try and give a nice coat all over the surface here to take away the shiny coat that we got with the gloss varnish. Now it's important to do thin coats on this. You don't want it to pool, and if you find that you miss stuff later, wait for them to dry, and you can come back in for another coat. And with that, our matte varnish is applied and dry. Now you can see it's hard to tell where the edge of this decal actually is, and you've got this nice painted on look. Now the only thing left for you to do is to come in and do some weathering. If you found there were any blemishes during your process of painting this or applying the decal, these are prime targets for weathering. Remember, we don't make mistakes, we have happy little accidents. Shoulder pad's in the same state here. You can see that we've taken off that the sheen from the gloss, and our wrinkles are all gone, and the only thing left for this to be ready for the tabletop is to paint that shoulder border. Alright, with those now drying, I think we're going to call it good for today. I'd like to thank you guys for hanging out with me, and hopefully you found this particularly useful. If you used any of these techniques on your particular miniatures and had some awesome effects, we'd encourage you guys to check us out on Facebook and our Facebook group, or maybe even tag us on Instagram so we can see those hobby images. If there's anything you think we could do to improve, please sound off in the comments below. In addition to that, if there's any kind of content or tutorials or anything you'd like to see us do, that's the place to let us know. We do check those out, and we do take what you say to heart. If you'd like to support what we're doing over here, check us out at deathdesigns.com. Anything you do over there helps keep the lights on, helps keep me employed so I can keep producing content for you. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel, ding the little bell so you get alerts when we go live. And with that, I think we're going to sign off today. Thank you for watching, and happy wargaming.